Hi, first grade. So we are going to be finishing up our capital letters today, but we're going to have to learn some new strokes and their starting spot to make our capital letters. All right, so first we'll learn a backwards slant stroke. All right, so a backwards slant stroke has to start over half a space, so we have room for when it slants down and backwards. All right, so our backward slant stroke starts over half of a space and it slants down and backwards. All right, so let's practice just doing one or two backward slant strokes. So go over half of a space and slant down and back. And now let's go over half a space and slant down and back. All right, so that's the stroke that we're going to start our next capital letter with. All right, our next capital letter is A. Capital A is a slant stroke letter, so we form it differently from lowercase a, which is what kind of a letter? Good, a clock stroke letter. All right, and its letter name is A. So the starting spot, like we said, is the top baseline, half a space from the margin. All right, so to write my capital A, I'm going to find my starting spot and pull a backward slant down to touch the baseline. Then I'm going to touch my starting spot and do a forward slant down to touch the baseline. Then I'm going to go to where the dotted line meets my first stroke and make a dash stroke over till I touch the second stroke. All right, so that's my capital A. All right, I'm going to write it again. Tell me what I need to write. Good, capital A. So I find my starting spot, which is half a space over from the margin. Pull a backward slant down to the baseline, then touch the starting spot and pull a forward slant down to the baseline. Go to where the dotted line crosses my first stroke and make a dash stroke to connect it with that goes all the way to the second stroke. All right, class, what is that? Excellent. Capital A. All right, let's get ready to write that. Find the starting spot, a half space from the margin on the top baseline. Pull a backward slant down to the baseline. Touch your starting spot, pull a forward slant down to the baseline. Then go to where your first stroke crosses the dotted line and make a dash stroke that goes between the two strokes. What is that? Excellent. Capital A. All right. Let's see, I'd like you to write another one. So find your starting spot, go a half space from the end of your last letter. All right, touch your starting spot, pull a backward slant down to the baseline, touch your starting spot, pull a forward slant down to the baseline, and then cross it. Class, what is that? Excellent, capital A. All right, let's write one more. So find your starting spot. Right. So a half space from the margin. Pull a slant stroke down to the baseline. Touch your starting spot. Pull a slant stroke down to the baseline. Go to where the base or the dotted line crosses your first stroke and make a dash stroke. Class, what did you just write? Excellent, capital A. Very nice. So that was a slant stroke that started with a backwards slant. All right, now we're going to learn about some letters that start with a forward slant stroke. So that means it would start right by the margin at the top baseline, and we would have a forward slant like that. All right. So the first capital letter that we're going to learn that has a forward slant is capital V. Class, what are we going to write? Good. Capital V. It's a slant stroke letter just like lowercase v, and we form it in the same way. The only difference is that the capital is tall and the letter name is V. So to make our capital V, we're going to start close to the margin. Let's see. We'll pull a slant stroke down to the baseline and push a slant stroke back up to the top baseline. What is this? Good, capital V. All right, let's do another one. So starting close to the margin, or it's where our last letter ended if we're not at the margin. We'll pull a slant stroke down to the baseline and then push a slant stroke up to the top baseline. All right, class, what is that? Good, capital V. All right, now it's your turn to write a capital V. So find your starting spot right by your last letter at the top baseline. Pull a slant stroke down to the baseline and push a slant stroke up to the top baseline. All right, again, find your starting spot. Pull a slant stroke down to the baseline and push a slant stroke up to the top baseline. Class, what is that? Good, capital V. All right, our next slant stroke letter that we're going to learn is capital W. Class, what are we going to write? Good, capital W. So capital W is a slant stroke letter, just like our lowercase w, and we form it the same way. The only difference is it's tall. So we'll start our capital W, just like our capital V. Right, so at the top baseline, we pull a slant stroke down to the baseline, push a slant stroke up to the top baseline, but then we repeat it. We pull a slant stroke down to the baseline and push a slant stroke up to the top baseline. Class, what is that? Good, capital W. All right, watch one more time. So we start close to our margin or the last letter at the top baseline. Pull a slant stroke down to the baseline, push a slant stroke up to the top baseline, pull a slant stroke down to the baseline, and push a slant stroke up to the top baseline, capital W. All right, so get ready to write your capital W. Okay, so starting at the top baseline, pull a slant stroke down to the baseline, push a slant stroke up to the top baseline, pull a slant stroke down to the baseline, and push a slant stroke up to the top baseline. Class, what is that? Good, capital W. Let's do it again. Find your starting spot. Pull a slant stroke down to the baseline, push a slant stroke up to the top baseline, pull a slant stroke down to the baseline, and push a slant stroke up to the top baseline. All right, what did you just write, class? Good, capital W. All right, we have one more capital slant stroke letter to learn, and that is our capital X. What are we going to write? Good, capital X. All right, it's a slant stroke letter, just like lowercase x, and we form it the same way, but it's tall. All right, and the letter name is X. So I'll touch the top baseline where my starting spot is and pull a slant stroke down and forward a space. Then I'll lift my pencil and touch the top baseline a space away from the starting spot and pull a backward slant down to the top baseline. That is my capital X. All right, one more time. So I start at the top baseline, close to the margin or my last letter, and I'll pull a this is a forward slant. Pull a forward slant down to the baseline, lift my pencil, go a space away from our starting spot and pull a backward slant down to the baseline for capital X. All right, class, it's your turn to write capital X. All right, find your starting spot, pull a slant stroke all the way down to the baseline, make it the width of a space. Then touch the top baseline a space away from your starting spot and pull a backward slant down to the baseline. What is that, class? Very good, capital X. All right, let's do one more. So find your starting spot. All right, pull a slant stroke down to the baseline, the width of a space. Then touch the top baseline a space away from your starting spot and pull a backward slant down to the baseline. Class, what did you just write? Very good, capital X. All right, excellent work. And those are all our slant stroke letters. We only have one more capital to learn.